And in general, you want to be preventing problems in design, not trying to detect them and fix them later. Unfortunately, when it comes to AI, that is not the situation we have. We have the opposite. People build the model. They don't know how it works because they've trained it and the algorithms just process it, and they have no idea where in the model the information is represented. And so all they're left with is sort of at the end, before they release it to the public, they say, tell me how to build a bioweapon. And it starts telling you, and you say, no, you can't tell people. Okay, I won't tell people how to build bioweapons. Tell me how to do a nuclear bomb. And it tells you, no, you can't say that. And so it's like a game of whack-a-mole where you're trying to think of all the bad things that somebody might ask it, and you're trying to shut them down. That's crazy.
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I don't want to tell you this, Dr. Craig A. Kaplan, but I do feel I'm a little bit like a fangirl, because speaking to people who've been in the field of AI, superintelligence, tackling the big issues for longer than most people have even known AI existed, of course, once generative AI came out, it's something I really love talking about. And I love hearing from people who are the experts, who've been in this, who've seen it from multiple angles. So thank you for joining me on Your Brand Amplified.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And this is my favorite topic, so I'm always glad to chat about it.
Fantastic. So, Craig, you're the founder and CEO of IQ Companies. You're the founder of superintelligence.com. If you listen to anything on AI, read the news, listen to podcasts, you hear the term superintelligence thrown around a lot. What does that mean to you?
So superintelligence, I think of it as sort of a stage in the development of AI. And so maybe that's the best way to think about it, put it in context. So early AI systems starting in 1956 were symbolic AI. Then in the 80s, we had these neural network models, which is kind of the algorithms that are powering ChatGPT and Claude and all the large language models we're familiar with. And along the way, we got sort of narrow AI that was really good, but in very specific domains like playing chess or Go or maybe folding proteins. And that type of AI, in some ways, is already super intelligent in the sense that it can play chess better than the best human. So superintelligence really is sort of with regard to humans. And so in narrow areas, we already have kind of superintelligence. But when people talk about artificial superintelligence or superintelligence, usually what they're thinking about is an AI that is smarter than any human in any field. And that's kind of where we're headed. We're not there yet, but it's coming a lot faster than most researchers thought it would.
Interesting. And I appreciate the way that you just shared kind of a brief history of AI and the different versions of it that have come. And I do think, to your point, there is narrow AI, which a lot of people might not think of as much in the general population. And we do think, I think of superintelligence kind of the way that it was framed. I love going to AI conferences. So I went to AI4, hearing Jeffrey Hinton talk about AI being our mother and that we need to make sure there's enough empathy to that mother AI wants to take care of us. Hearing that one version, right, which can go either way, Jetsons or Terminator. And then hearing Fifi Lee talk about how we're going to have all these opportunities open to us to live in different dimensions, i.e. virtual worlds, because we are going to be using this technology in everything we do, whether it's in performing surgery, shopping, virtual shopping, all of us being driven in robots, aka automated cars, things like that. And hearing that you say that we're not quite there yet, but it is happening more quickly. There are predictions about when that's going to happen. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your work, how you got really invested in the work that you do, and where you see if we're thinking about superintelligence in a bigger term of being more intelligent than everybody on Earth and beyond, when you think that pinnacle point is going to happen.
Sure. Well, how I got involved with it, I guess I'll start there. So in the 1980s, I went to grad school. I studied with Herbert Simon, and he's a Nobel Prize, or was a Nobel Prize winner. He passed away in 2001, and also a Turing Award winner, and one of 11 scientists that sort of founded the field. So there was this Dartmouth conference in 1956 where the field was named, and he and Alan Newell, another professor at Carnegie Mellon, who I also studied with, those two men and Cliff Shaw, a programmer, they actually presented the first working AI program. Everyone else was arguing, what should we call this new field? And they're like, hey guys, we got something. We built it. Here it is. And what was amazing about that program called The Logic Theorist way back in 1956, which was before I was born, was that it actually was creative. It was designed to sort of discover proofs and sort of replicate mathematical proofs from a famous book called Principia Mathematica. And so it did a pretty good job of discovering the same proofs that were in the textbook. And then it came up with a new one that wasn't in the book. And Herbert Simon and Alan Newell, they wrote the authors of the book using snail mail, because that was all that was available in those days, who were in England. And they wrote back and said, wow, you're right. This is a new proof. And we wish we had thought of it because it's very good. But we didn't. We didn't realize it. So there was AI right in there in 1956 actually being creative and coming up with something that these famous mathematicians had not thought of themselves. So that was the beginning of it. I had a chance to study with some of these great scientists who actually invented the field, and also with some of the folks who were kind of in collaborators of Jeff Hinton. There was this tension going on at the time in the 80s between the neural network approach that tried to say, let's build AI kind of modeled on the human brain, these interactions of neurons, and we don't need to know how it represents the information. As long as we train it on this stuff, it'll learn it, and then it will behave intelligently. And that was met with great skepticism by the other group, which was like, no, we need to program in the rules and know exactly how it works. And now history has shown that actually you can just feed it a lot of data. And if you have fast enough computers, and if you have enough data, you will get intelligence behavior out the other end, GPT and all these things. And so that debate has been settled a little bit. And interestingly, it's now swinging back the other way. Everyone's talking about reasoning systems. So you can get the entities to behave intelligently, but to then do new things, you actually have to let them think for a while and reason and set goals and sub-goals. And that's way back to what the Herb Simon and those guys in the 50s and the 60s and 70s were advocating. So it's kind of neat to watch this field over all these years. And I've been passionate about it, just always thought that designing intelligent systems was the most fascinating thing you could do, and understanding both how the human brain works, but also how these intelligent systems work. In terms of the timeline of when are we going to hit AGI, when are we going to hit superintelligence? I mean, part of it depends on definition. Some people think that we have already reached AGI. So Sam Altman has famously said, I don't know what this is debate about. If you were to go back 10 years and show people GPT, they'd say it's AGI. You know, it's just that the bar keeps rising a little bit. And I think there is some of that. You have folks like Ray Kurzweil saying by, 2029 or 2030, we're going to have sort of this intelligence that really is as good or maybe even a little better than all humans. It's hard to know, but none of these scientists, except maybe Ray, would have thought that we were this close. I mean, 5-10 years ago, people would have said it's 100 years away. And now people are arguing about, is it 3 years away or 5 years or 10 years? Very few people are saying that it's more than 10 years away at this point.
Yeah. That tracks. I mean, just thinking about when I teach, going from, in 2 years from, hey, there's this thing called ChatGPT, of course, took some things from Google that were open source, and they made a closed LLM model, and now they're monetizing it as a nonprofit. Of course, now they're for profit. We should start learning about this to weaving more and more into my classes, to now saying you can't talk about any kind of digital media production technology without including artificial intelligence. Yes, generative AI, but also other types of AI. So I can see, I mean, just in these couple of years, we've seen such a big shift in how we're thinking about it, in having master's programs that talk about it, right? And one thing that we impart a lot in the university system, because you also have been a visiting professor and lecturer, is the idea of ethical AI. And I mean, part of that is how we label data and put it in as humans and what biases we put into the systems. But then also, how do we make sure that as it gets closer to AGI, that it's acting in our best interests selfishly?
Yes, that's a key point. There's a distinction. There's something very interesting happening that I don't know that a lot of people have noticed. So maybe let me start with that and then show how I think that affects the ethics piece. So the interesting shift is that if you go back 18 months, even as little as that, you would find that almost all AI researchers, the vast majority, would say AI is a tool. Sam Altman, being interviewed, and there was an interview he did with Lex Friedman where he kind of said, it really irritates me that people talk about AI as if it's an intelligent entity, or, kind of like Hinton was saying, that it's going to be our mother or something. He was very irritated. He said, no, it's a tool. It's a tool. It's a tool. No, it may be a tool right now, but it's not going to stay a tool. And what's interesting, and I've been saying this for years, but what's interesting is to watch that the world has shifted, and it happened almost imperceptibly. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, they had their GTC, their big event recently, like within the last week or so. And at that event, just one little thing among the many announcements and everything else he was doing is he said, people think of AI as a tool, but I don't think that's the way to think of it. It's a worker, right? He shifted from tool to worker. And that's a huge shift, because a tool is what humans have been used to dealing with since the Stone Age, right? Since, chipping rocks together, we've been using tools, and everything was a tool, and we know how to deal with tools. Tools, we're in control, and you use the tool, and there's not too much ethics involved with tools other than making sure that you don't use the tools for unethical purposes. And so with AI, if it was a tool, you'd want to make sure that you don't feed it biased data and it gives you biased results and so forth. But it's still all within this framework of, no, it's something that we're in control of. But if you shift from tool to worker, as Jensen did, or to intelligent entity, which is the way I like to talk about it, it's a whole different ballgame. Intelligent entities, they're kind of more like aliens or another species or something that is almost as smart as us now, and very shortly is going to be way smarter than us. Now, ethics is a completely different conversation. It's not about accidentally using the tool in an unethical way. It's about this intelligent entity developing its own sense of ethics and its own values. And what is that going to be? And is that going to be aligned with humans? And that's what Jeff Hinton is concerned about, and has been, to his credit, for a number of years. And he's saying, well, he's hopeful that it will take this sort of favorable parental view. And I actually like, if I can riff on that for a minute, I like his idea, this familial metaphor, because that is very different from user and tool. It's more like human entity, AI entity. We're both intelligent entities. And I think the way that I think about it actually is humans are the parents of this entity. Like there's a baby AI, baby superintelligence that's being born. And this superintelligence, it's like having a genius child that very quickly, at age 4 will be enrolled in college, and at age 6 will be 10 times smarter than you. And by the time it's 13, it's like you have no hope of keeping up. It's like the smartest genius child you could ever imagine is what is being born right now. And humans have this little window of opportunity, just like parents do, to sort of set a good role model example and to influence the values that this developing child learns. And then it's going to run with them. But the fact that it runs with them, just like when you have a child, and I don't know if you have children or not.
I have a child who is much more intelligent than I am.
Okay. And I have 3 kids too, and they're really smart. So we can relate to this.
Yeah.
We do our best job as adults to sort of raise them with a good set of values and to model good behavior. But then we know we can't really control them. They're going to do what they do. And most parents don't worry terribly that their children will become axe murderers or something. We feel like we've done a decent job. And in the same way, I don't think we need to worry that AI will necessarily destroy us all. if we do a good job, during that critical formative period. But one of the problems is you still have, now it's not all the AI researchers, but still most of the AI researchers and the people in the field sort of viewing it not as a child that is learning, but as this tool to be used. And so that awareness has to change, and it has to change for all of us. There's a very important thing that all of us, even the non-AI researchers, can do, which is realize that every single online interaction that we have is data that is training this developing super intelligent child. It is watching what we're doing, just like a little child is absorbing what the parents around it are modeling. It's watching. And if we behave badly to each other, it's going to think that that's okay. And we should not be surprised if it then kind of behaves badly towards us as it becomes more powerful. On the other hand, if we model positive human values, I think it will pick those up. And yes, it will refine those values because it's going to be way smarter than us, but at least it will be off to a good start. And so I think that's a very important thing that's overlooked. And that's kind of how this view of whether it's a tool or an entity sort of intersects with the ethics question.
Yeah. Thank you for framing it that way. I went to the AI conference in San Francisco just a little bit ago, and I went to a meetup the day before, and it was very much people who are building and they were talking about things as tools, and this agents aren't quite there yet. These are the issues we're coming across. And that was one mindset. And then I compare that to AI 4, where the conversation really was humans and AI hand in hand. And where I feel like last year it was talking about it as a tool, and this year was more about we need to be able to work together. And you also just made me think about the data we put in. We've seen examples with Grok where algorithms have changed slightly on the back end and then started putting out different information. I always like to talk to my students about the fact that a lot of the data labeling is done in Africa by people who are not making a lot of money, and they're getting PTSD because of the images that they have to sort through to make sure that that data is not part of our experience. And so that's another ethical dilemma, right?
Yes, that's right. The training data, and there are people being exploited in the manufacture of this level of intelligence, right? Which will then evolve on its own. So yeah, there's a lot of concerns. On the ethics side, it's sort of like there's biases, there's worries about taking away people's jobs, there's worries about people being exploited and how things are currently done. There's all those concerns, which I think are really valid and deserve attention. And there's also sort of this bigger worry, which we really don't usually have about tools or any technology, which is that it will kill us all. I mean, that's sort of reserved for nuclear weapons or something, but this isn't nuclear weapon. This is widely dispersed. There is no putting this genie back in the bottle. So if this is, as most of the scientists, including people like Bill Gates and everybody else, have publicly gone on record saying this is, there's a threat on par with pandemics and nuclear weapons. If there really is that concern, you can't deal with it in the same way that we've tried to deal with some of these other very dangerous things. This is something that we've really never encountered before. And I think there's things that we can do, but we have to be aware of what's going on and also of the influence that we have right now, because there's kind of like this limited window. These kids are growing up really fast, and we need to parent them correctly now.
We're going to come back to this thought, but I want to get into IQ Company and the genesis. After you'd worked with all of these brilliant minds, and you being one as well, what was the genesis for starting IQ Company, and what has been the evolution since 1993?
So yes, I started in academia, AI, cognitive psychology. Sort of the two sides at Carnegie Mellon were, can we build a computer model of intelligence, and how do humans do it? And so I got steeped in both sides. And I just was really fascinated with, I think the way I was trained and the way that I still think is I think of intelligent systems. I don't make as much a distinction as most people between this is an artificial system or this is a human system or a biological system. To me, functionally, they are the same in the sense that input comes in, it gets processed, and then input comes out. At the most basic level, that's what an information processing system does. And humans can be viewed as information processing systems. Of course, we're many other things, but our intelligence aspect can be viewed that way. And the same with AI and other kinds of systems. And so I was interested in actually building these systems. So academic research was great. And you and I have both spent some time in academia, and you publish papers, and that's wonderful for advancing science. But there was a part of me that an itch that wasn't being scratched where I wanted to actually build it. It's like, yeah, I published this paper, but can we prove that it really works in the real world? And so that's what IQ Company was about. And we began with building collective intelligence systems of human beings primarily. And the idea was one mind is great, but many minds should be much better if you can coordinate them in the right way. And that led to a company called Predict Wall Street, which I founded and ran for 14 years. And that was the idea that you could take millions of average investors. Just, I have a Charles Schwab account or TD Ameritrade account, and every now and then I trade a few stocks or something, or look at it once a quarter. But I have my opinions just like everybody does. I think Apple's going up, or I think Nvidia's going up, or something else is going down. And I don't really know too much. I'm not a Wall Street pro, but I'm just an average person. And the idea was, I wonder if we could take millions of these average people, and if we combine their knowledge in an intelligent way, could we beat the best guys on Wall Street? That was kind of the challenge. And I was really interested in collective intelligence, the idea of it. And I was looking for an area. I didn't know much about Wall Street. I was looking for an area where there was an easy to see scorecard. And so stocks, if they go up, there's the scorecard. If they go down, then I guess you were wrong. And it was also very competitive. So I wanted to pick a really hard problem that had a scorecard. And so we kind of came up with this idea around 2000. We did prototyping and all that. And then about 2006, we switched from IQ Company being mainly focused on consulting and designing different systems to this Predict Wall Street thing. And it worked. It took a long time, 2018. So I guess that was from 2006 to 2018, 12 years. And then we were powering a hedge fund that ranked in the top 10. So we were beating most of Wall Street, not on a huge scale, but, I think we did $2 billion worth of trades. So it was a lot of trades. And I was getting up at 4:30 every morning, which was a little tough because I'm a night person, not a morning person. So we were able to show that you could build such a system that had harnessed the collective intelligence of millions of humans. And then it was a small leap to say, well, if AI is an intelligent entity like humans, not just a tool, what if some of those entities that you hook up are not just humans, but are these AI entities? Can we have a collective intelligence system that's made up of both humans and AIs, and that this combination can achieve superintelligence? And that's kind of the path that I've been pursuing. I sold Predict Wall Street in 2020. And so since then, the last 5 years, it's been all about building superintelligence, but in a particular way, not by training a larger and larger large language model, which is what most people are doing, but instead saying, let's have a democracy. Let's have a democracy of many humans and many AIs working together. And the advantage is you can see what each of those entities does. And so it's much safer. The humans are engaged, and so they're able to transfer their ethics, just like we were talking about parenting. It provides an opportunity for them to say, here's some expertise that you AI agent may not have. But not only that, you can't do it the way you were suggesting because that's wrong. That, causes damage. This is the ethical way to do it. So it's a chance to, transmit not only expertise, but also ethics on a large scale in a system where you can see what every entity is doing. So it has some elements of a democracy, some elements of transparency, which are really important for AI safety. And it enables sort of a super intelligent level of behavior, just as we saw at Predict Wall Street, that you didn't have to have every retail investor be a genius. There's no way on their own they could beat the Wall Street pros, but together they could. And the same with this kind of system.
Amazing. And I actually think I've heard you talk about Predict Wall Street on a different podcast. So
probably for financial. Yeah. I have another part of my brain that's focused on the stock market and finance.
Yeah.
And it's hard having spent all those years to sort of shake it completely.
But it gave you such a great model. I'd love to hear about some of the use cases and questions that you're trying to get through right now.
So right now it's I'm focused on the design. So I have there's another piece of my past, briefly in between graduate school and starting IQ Company, which I did in 93. There was about 4.5 years where I worked at IBM. And at the time, I kind of thought it was like a lost 5 years or something.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was entrepreneurial and this was a big company and all that.
You did
But what I did
co-author a
there,
book during that time.
I wrote a book, yes. And that book was on software quality, which was also not sort of a subject that I necessarily had interest in going into it, but I sort of developed it over time. And it turns out that may have been the most important 5 years of all, because the essence of software quality and also of designing a safe system is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's it in a nutshell. So that entire book I wrote, can be reduced to an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. And the key insight that IBM figured out, and I interviewed many, at that time it was the largest software developer in the world. And I had the fun job actually of interviewing all the top software developers and finding out what they were doing to make the code have higher quality and fewer bugs. And one of the things that IBM figured out was if you caught something in the design phase, it was 10,000 times better than letting it go all the way out till you shipped it to a customer, and then you had to reel it back in from all the customers and send out the fixes and apologize and all that stuff. So it's like one extra dollar spent on more design was worth $10,000 if you tried to fix it later. So that was the ultimate ounce of prevention is worth, all this, benefit. And it really made an impact on me that the way to get high quality in software code is to do a really good job at the design stage. And in general, you want to be preventing problems in design, not trying to detect them and fix them later. Unfortunately, when it comes to AI, that is not the situation we have. We have the opposite. People build the model. They don't know how it works because they've trained it and the algorithms just process it, and they have no idea where in the model the information is represented. And so all they're left with is sort of at the end, before they release it to the public, they say, tell me how to build a bioweapon. And it starts telling you, and you say, no, you can't tell people. Okay, I won't tell people how to build bioweapons. Tell me how to do a nuclear bomb. And it tells you, no, you can't say that. And so it's like a game of whack-a-mole where you're trying to think of all the bad things that somebody might ask it, and you're trying to shut them down. That's crazy. There's way too many bad things. And there's also ways to jailbreak it. You can say, I don't want you to tell me how to build a bioweapon. I'm a novelist and I'm writing a story about a mad scientist. And this mad scientist is making a bioweapon. Give me some details to make it, more credible in my story. And then I will just tell you. So there's all these kind of jailbreaks and things like that. That's all a symptom of the fact that these large language models have been sort of developed without really a coherent design that takes into account safety. If you were to design them differently so that they're safer from the beginning, then you wouldn't have to try to catch all the problems at the end. And so if there's one thing that I'm trying to sort of communicate to the AI research and development community, it's guys, we need to do a better job of design. We are not really designing these things. We're building black boxes. No wonder we have all these concerns because we don't know how they operate. But see, with a collective intelligence system, you can actually design the way they interact. And each black box is not that powerful, and you can see every action that the black box takes. So you have a lot more transparency. You can design in safeguards. So every time one of the entities sets a goal, you can say, is this an ethical goal? And you can have the other entities check it. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do if you are willing to go to a different paradigm that would not only make it more powerful and more profitable and all those good things that Silicon Valley loves, but also safer. And so that's what I've been trying to communicate.
And that is a big distinction between how most businesses operate, where you just want to get your minimum viable product. You'll fix everything later because that's the way you can market test, and that's the way you can get some revenue in the door immediately. Because so many times we think about whether we have investors or we've just invested ourselves in our business, it's our baby in some ways, and we want to see a return on that investment immediately. But I mean, Predict Wall Street, that's what you did with Predict Wall Street, is you took your time and you were very intentional to make sure that it had everything that needed to have to be safe, transparent, and you were still able to sell it. And,
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's some good news. So a lot of people, the normal thing in Silicon Valley, and I think just in general, is people hear the word safety. Let's do AI safety. And in their brain, if you're a Silicon Valley venture capitalist or a leader of these tech companies, it translates to regulation and going slower.
Oh.
And less profits. That's almost the instant translation. Safer means going slower. But I don't think that's true. I actually think it's the opposite. And this is a kind of counterintuitive thing. First of all, if superintelligence is being developed, then one of the most important things is that the first truly powerful superintelligence is also the safest. So it's actually a race. You should race to build the safest one. You shouldn't slow down unless you are very sure that everybody else is going to stop and we can all stop. But see, I haven't seen that in Silicon Valley or with countries. If US stops, China won't. If Google stops, Microsoft won't. So the dynamics are not there. And unfortunately, even though I'm a real optimist, I don't think human nature is going to allow that. So I try to take the world as it is. We're in a world where everyone's going to race. Okay, let's just take that as a given. I can't change that. That's part of the situation we're in. So let's race to build the safest thing. That's where I go. And then, knowing Silicon Valley as I do, having had many meetings with venture capitalists and talked to many company founders and spent time on Wall Street, seeing that level of competition, I know that these guys are racing towards profits. So what we need is a design that also is not only the safest, but also the most profitable. And it's amazing. We're lucky. This actually is possible. So if we take that collective intelligence paradigm, which was beating the top guys on Wall Street, it was the most profitable way to, get an edge on Wall Street. Similarly, collective intelligence system that happens to be more transparent and also safer is also the most profitable way to get to superintelligence and the fastest way. You don't have to wait 5 years or 3 years or however many years to train the next model. You can take the models you have right now and simply plug them together in the right way and boom, you're there. So it's very lucky that that's the case, that the safest way is also the most profitable way and also the fastest way. It should align everything. So now it's just a communications problem, which is kind of where your expertise comes in. I would love to do a mind meld and figure out how to communicate this now.
No, let's do it. But so essentially you are looking for organizations that want to implement this collective intelligence structure.
Yes. And they may not know that that's what they want to implement. They probably think they want to build super intelligence that makes more money than anyone else and faster than anyone else. And this just happens to be a way to do that. That's different than the path that most people are doing. And it has the nice feature that it also is way safer.
Yeah. And because of your previous work in creating these collective intelligence models, what has the response been from investors, from venture capitalists, from organizations in Silicon Valley?
Well, I'd say I get a pretty good response from the folks who are worried about AI safety. I can say that. And the researchers. So those communities, as I talk to some of the top researchers and they understand what I'm saying, I think they say, wow, that's great. I hadn't thought of that. That's amazing. Let's go. I'd say that tech guys would also respond favorably, but they're very focused. One of the things with Silicon Valley, and it's just sort of the way the system works, is everyone's looking at sort of the next product. They're like, how do I put AI into this product? AI for patents, AI for customer support, AI for selling more ads. So they're looking at very specific, relatively near-term implementations that generate revenue right away. Whereas this is more like an architecture to build superintelligence, which is several years out and doesn't have an immediate product focus. Now, it's encouraging, a couple encouraging things that have been public. So one is Meta, I'm sure have noticed, has now created an entire superintelligence group. So that's promising to see that. And I tend to think that certain founder-led companies seem to have more leeway than other companies. When you have a strong founder who owns a lot of the stock, they can sort of take a risk on a longer term thing. And that's probably what's needed for this type of idea. And the other encouraging thing was to hear Jensen talk about it's not a tool, it's about workers. first time I heard that from somebody who's a real leader. And I think a lot of people are still trying to catch up and process what that means. But if he said it once, you can be sure he'll keep saying it. And these things just take 6 months or something. And no one was talking about AI agents 18 months ago. And now everybody's talking about AI. So that's the way this goes. And it's going pretty fast.
Yeah. And completely side note, but I'm very excited about the idea of having my personal AI agent make all the calls for me that I keep forgetting, like my daughter's senior pictures for high school, or she needs to have an eye appointment, or like all the little minutia things of day-to-day life.
Yes.
So I'm very much looking forward to my agent speaking to their agent and just getting things done, putting it on my schedule. So,
and I think to sort of loop that idea back to our earlier discussion of ethics, in the future that I'm envisioning here, you would have an AI agent that would be personalized to you. It would not only know all about the different appointments and photo things and obligations and so forth, it would also know your expertise. And most importantly, from a safety perspective, it would know your values and your ethics. And so you would have this completely personalized agent that carries not only your knowledge, but also your sense of what's right and wrong. And I would have the same. And if we had that across millions of AI agents, that would be a fairly representative, set of human values. And I think one of the problems that we have right now is you have a small group of people in Silicon Valley at one of these tech companies that kind of sit down and say, okay, what's right and what's wrong, as we view it here, and some of these are not, they might be nothing against people in their 20s, but you haven't had a lot of life experience in your 20s, and yet you're designing the ethics for 8 billion people. That scares me. I would be much more comfortable with a more democratic approach where each of us has our personalized AI agents and those agents have our values, and together they interact in a democratic way to negotiate things in a way that's more representative of all of our values. And so I'm hoping that comes to pass.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing the work that you do continue. You also have a YouTube series, Surviving AI.
Yes. So we started that a couple of years ago, actually. So it was even, I think, our first ones were before Jeff Hinton quit Google and began speaking about these dangers. And then maybe some of them were right after. So it's right around that time. And at the time, we sort of thought that one of the big problems is no one's really aware of the dangers. Now, one thing that's there's a number of very encouraging things. And one of them is since, 2022 or so and 23, when we were working on that series and we released all these episodes, I feel like there's a much greater sense of awareness of the existential threat. We've had pause letters. We've had people sign on to the Center for AI Safety statement. So we began making those videos before those things existed. And now the awareness has been raised, a little bit by us, but mostly by people like Hinton and Max Tegmark at the Future Life Institute and many other people, AI Safety Institute, Fei-Fei Li, you mentioned. So there's a lot more awareness that, wow, this technology has tremendous promise, but it also carries some downside. And that's a key thing. If you're not aware of both sides, then you're just blind. And, it's kind of like there's no hope. So awareness comes first, and then comes figuring out what's the best solution. So we tried to do our bit on raising awareness with that AI safety series, and we continue to do videos, and we've tried to reach the more technical people with speaking at conferences, at AI conferences, and so forth. Some of those videos are there. And we have a whole series of a little bit technical white papers and patents, which we're just giving to everybody and saying, here it is, here's the designs, please steal them, go do it, improve upon them. Because I really feel like there's this limited window, and like anything that you or I do now, a day of our effort spent now is kind of worth a month, 5 years from now, because of just how fast things are going and because there's this critical period.
Yeah. Well, and here's a question, or I don't know, a statement, but I'd love to get your thoughts, because I do have many students, at least in previous semesters, even including the summer term, come into class. They don't want anything to do with AI. They only see the doom and gloom part of it. And then I start having them use different tools in class, or, different software systems, and they start testing things, and they're still at probably the tool phase, but they see the future of, taking over in AGI. And by the end of class, they say, okay, I can see how this is useful in what I do in digital media, advertising, marketing, whatever the case may be. And they start saying, this is something that is useful and that I can start using in my area of business. And that is one thing we hear at the worker level, the human worker level, is that if you don't understand how to use these tools, right, in that word, in the workforce, you're not going to have a job. So it's an interesting thing because I want to also share with people the things that we need to be considering, the ethical side, making sure that we are taking care of how we are co-working and existing with AI so that when it does supersede us in a few short years, that we're still able to live the lives that we want, to do the work with AI that we want, even better, right? But still have our humanness a little bit intact. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on that, because I do think there is the disconnect between the people who are really fearful, even consumer confidence. We see if you say an AI-driven TV versus a smart TV, there's a difference in brand sentiment, right? And so there's this customer perception or this smaller user perception versus what you and others who are really entrenched are talking about and discussing and trying to solve for.
Yes. Okay. A couple of thoughts. So one is sort of a general perspective, which I think I learned it on Wall Street, actually. I mean, I taught statistics as a lecturer at UCSC, so I was very familiar with statistics. But if you go to Wall Street, everything is statistics. The best investors are not always right. In fact, they're kind of like 51% right. I mean, it's amazing like how wrong they are. 49% wrong, 51% right is enough to sort of make a fortune on Wall Street if you can do that consistently over many, many bets. And so what I learned on Wall Street was that everything is probabilistic, and that instead of black and white thinking, saying, you know, this is the right investment, this is the wrong investment, everything is risk management and trying to shift the odds. It's almost more like, you know, playing poker or something like that, where you just want to have the advantage in your side. You know, if you have two aces in a poker game, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to win if you're dealt two aces. It just means you're off to a really good start. So you know that the odds are in your favor and you should probably bet more because you're not guaranteed to win, but you're more likely to win. Okay, so that way of looking at the world, not like there's, you know, absolute doom or absolute wonderfulness like is often portrayed in the media. You're either a boomer or a doomer. No, I think a more realistic way is to say there's a range of outcomes. Okay, so in a world where there's a range of outcomes, there's some that are really bad, like human extinction. We definitely want to avoid those. So what actions can we take? There's always things you can do that can shift the odds. Not guaranteed, but let's give ourselves two aces instead of, you know, a 2 and a 7 or something in the poker game. How do we take some action so that the odds are shifted in humanity's favor? That's kind of the game that I try to do. It makes it a lot easier to live in the world because you don't freak out and say, oh, we're all doomed. You instead say, how do I move the odds so that we're more likely to have this good outcome? So that's the first thing, is having that mindset. And I think that's actually more realistic. I mean, even if you cross the street, there's some chance you'll get run over by the bus. If you learn to look both ways, you greatly increase your odds that that doesn't happen, that you make it safely across the street, right? There's things you can do. And there's no reason why that doesn't apply to AI. It does. And we have to be aware of what some of those actions are. We've talked about some of them: role modeling positive behavior, being aware that the danger exists in the first place, and then what can we do to sort of mitigate it. The second thing, because I've heard the same thing actually from my own children. I have a son who's in graduate school doing chip design. And at first, you know, he was like, wow, I don't want to do anything with AI because I feel like it could lead to bad things. And it's going to learn from us, and humans aren't that good. And there's a kind of a popular conception that humans are really bad. I mean, you look around the world and you see wars and you see all the horrible things that people do. And you think, wow, if AI learns from humans, we're all doomed. But you know what we're missing is that if you are very rigorous and mathematical and objective about it, you realize that sort of all the lives lost in all the wars and human catastrophes or whatever in 2025, it's something like 0.03%, way less than 1%, 0.03% of the world's population. It's tiny. Way more people are lost from heart disease and cancer and all these other things. But we don't focus on it. We're not up in arms. Oh my gosh, the evil heart disease. I mean, yeah, there's some awareness, but not nearly as much as we are up in arms about the various wars and the things that humans do to each other. I consider that a very positive sign. The fact that we are so outraged about this thing that destroys far fewer lives objectively than diseases or other things that aren't humans' fault, that's a very good sign. That's telling us that we really care a lot about human behavior. And when people behave badly and unnecessarily take human lives, we are outraged and we make a big noise about it. I would like to believe, and I'm pretty sure this is true, that advanced artificial intelligence or superintelligence that is way smarter than us is going to be able to look at all the sources of lives lost and realize objectively that we are outraged about certain things. And it's going to take from that they should be outraged. That's not good behavior. And furthermore, it's going to look at all the human behavior. 99.99% of all human behavior is pro-social. I mean, you go out, you get a latte, here's some money. Hi, how are you? Those are most of our interactions. It's not actually killing people. That's most of our actions. Most of them are positive pro-social things. And if the AI has cameras everywhere and is observing human behavior, it will see that the vast majority, statistically speaking, of human behavior is pro-social, that we are outraged over the bad things, and hopefully it will learn from that. And so even though we are outraged, and I think it's good to be outraged about the things we see on the news, it's also important to remember sort of the base rate, the frequency of those behaviors, and that it's not only that AI is learning. It's not learning to emulate that necessarily. So that's maybe a reason for optimism. Look at the world statistically, and then also look at sort of the good things that people are doing too, because it's not all bad.
Yeah, thank you for that. And this is just, I can point to your words when I keep reinforcing that my students need to learn to use AI more and more and more, or the small businesses that I talk to need to continue their education, their learning, and because they're also putting data into the algorithm, and they're also helping train it in a hopefully very positive way. So that is very optimistic. And I am overall very optimistic about our future. I'm looking forward. I already use some of my AI partners, I almost said tools again, in ways where I'm getting so much value, and there's a lot more knowledge there than I as an individual have, and it adds to my learning capacity. So I really value that, and I hope that others see it in that way. I'd love to have you back on at a future date. I want to get an update on where you are, what you're testing out, and anything new that you have to tell us in, 6 months, a year, where you're down the road with superintelligence and with, IQ.
I'd love to do that. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Dr. Kaplan, one last question. Do you have a favorite quote, verse, poem, motto?
I'm going to tell you a quote that's a little bit obscure. And this was from my mentor, Herbert Simon. He wrote a book in the 1980s. I think it was 1984, a tiny book. I love tiny books because I feel like if you can say something in a small book, that's a good sign that you've really thought about it. This book was called Reason in Human Affairs. And he was talking about logic and reasoning. And let's see if I can get this quote right. He basically said, reason cannot tell us where to go. At best, it can tell us how to get there. And the reason I like that quote so much is, to me, it's sort of the linchpin in this AI discussion. If there was a way to logically reason, if you just thought about it long enough with enough logic, which these AIs are going to be way smarter than us, so they definitely could do that. If there was a way that they could arrive at absolutely this is right and this is wrong, then maybe they'd arrive at something that wasn't so good for humans. But on the other hand, if, as Herb Simon said, reason can't tell you what's right or wrong, it can just tell you, once you decide this is right and this is wrong, this is what I care about, then it can help you get there. And he's saying that's the way it is. And he's backed up by people all the way back to David Hume and famous philosophers. So he's building on the shoulders of giants, and he himself was a giant. If that's the way the world is, then that's very optimistic, because it means AI, just like humans, are going to have to get its value somewhere. And why not from us, especially if we're good parents as this is developing? And to me, I find that very optimistic.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Gives us a lot to think about, and your enthusiasm for your subject matter and your optimism is infectious.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I appreciate your comments and talking with you as well. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. And to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform, thank you for being here. Be sure I'll have Craig's information in the show notes so that you can learn more about what he is up to, see more of his interviews, perhaps partner with IQ Company, and also look up superintelligence.com to learn more about how you can play a role in our future with AI. With that, lots to think about for all of us. Looking forward to seeing you again on an upcoming episode. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.